Closed doors, I'm a fool for your love.
So, good morning, everyone. So, for today's class, we will be discussing about inheritance on how to create inheritance and also how to set up constructors. Okay, so take note, constructors and methods are two different things. Okay, so later on I'll be discussing on what's the difference between the two. So first of all, so let's start. Uh, First thing you have to do is first create the file. Okay, create a new project. So this one, so I'll be using Java with new application. Next, then just name this one inheritance sample. Okay, so let's finish it. As you can see, you now have your sample code here. You also have your sample package and class and method. So let me just remove these comments first. Okay. So you have your main method. So this is every time we run the program, this is where the compiler starts running the code. So what we'll do next is to create a new class. Okay. So for us to create a new class, simply go to the package and then right click, new, and Java class. Okay, so for this class, let's say we will be creating, let's call this one shoe. Okay, so finish it. So as you can see, we now have our shoe class. Now, so every time we're going to, let's say, add an attribute here, let's just say string brand and double size. Okay, so we have it here. And then let's just say for the method, let's say set uh set shoe. We'll have this one. Oops, we first need to indicate public void since this is a method. Okay, so let's say uh just system out the value of uh then whatever the value of our shoes. That one. Okay. So we can also set a parameter here if we want to have the brand. So let's say, okay, let's have it in brand. Okay. So now, if ever we're going to use the set shoe, we'll have to set whatever the brand we want, and that brand will now be given to our attribute which will be used or be printed every time we call set shoe. Okay, so now to call the method, we have to set or create an instance of that shoe. So shoe is equals new shoe. So now we can have s dot set shoe. Now take note, set shoe is asking us to input a brand. So we can have here Nike. And then whenever we run this one, we can see brand Nike is now being outputted. What it means is it's calling our shoe method. Now, how about if we're going to uh, write constructors in this one, or we're going to extend this. Okay, so if we're going to extend this, we have to make sure that we have to set the constructors. Take note, constructors and methods are quite different. Okay, so when we say constructors, it has to have the same name with our uh, method, or not method but the class. Okay, so as you can see here, okay, so we have our shoe. Now, base every time we create an instance of a shoe, we can only create an open or uh, shoe class with no parameters. Now, what if we wanted to create a shoe wherein it will now, upon creating an instance of a shoe or creating an object of a shoe, we can immediately place the attributes that we are needed or we are needing. So example, if we're going to create an object of a shoe, we will ask immediately what is the brand and the size of the shoe that is being created. Okay, that is now a constructor. So we won't have to set it here on the method. We will not set the value when creating on this method, but it will be immediately created upon creating the instance of the class. So to do that, we can immediately, what we can do is, first, let's remove this one. Okay, and you can just, oops, okay, you can just use shoe and then open, close. Okay, so as you can see, this is just the same with this one, but it will now tell us that every time that we're going to create an instance of a shoe that has no parameter, take note, this has no parameter, it will set the value of the two values, which means we can have the, can use this or or have this none. As you can see, we have an error here, so don't mind the error. Later on, the reason why nagkaka-error tayo is that is our this is not referring to anything. Okay, so that's why let's create a new constructor shoe with a parameter. Okay, so let's have this string brand and global size and open, close. As you can see, upon creating that constructor, okay, we now have created or the error was gone. Because the reason for that one is because we are using the keyword this. Kaya siya nag-error. If hindi tayo gumamit ng this one, actually you can use a different one. Pero for this one, I just use this. Okay? So what will happen here is that let's set this one to, let's say, this, that brand equals brand, and this, that size equals size. Okay, so now, since by doing this or by creating these constructors, every time you're going to create a shoe that has no parameter, it will give the value string and double the value none and zero. But if you're going to place parameters, those parameters, the parameter for brand will now be given to the value or the attribute brand, and the parameter value for size will now be given to the attribute size. Okay, so that this is how we do constructors. So for example, if we're going to look here, okay, so let's say two, s equals new shoe. Say we'll have Nike and 8.5. Okay, so upon creating the object, we were able to set the brand and the size. So now, if I'm going to say S dot brand, or no, if I'm going to print the brand and the size is S dot size. Okay, so if we're going to run this one, as you can see, the values brand or the values on our parameters when we created has now been passed to our attributes Nike, attributes brand and size. Okay, that's our so that is how we construct our constructors. Now, the next thing we have to do is to create another one and then set that one as the subclass of our shoe. So to do that, again, we just go to our package, right click, new class. And then let's let's try or let's name our class walking. Okay. So now we have our walking method. Now, to make it a subclass of shoe, we just have to use the keyword extends followed by the class name. So by adding extends keyword and the name of the class, this is now a subclass of shoe. So right now, the next thing we're going to do is to create a new attribute for walking. So let's name this one Boolean is walking. And then, okay, so now we have a new attribute is Boolean. Now, every time we're going to use, or let's now create an constructor for walking. So this time around is going to be walking. Then let's set the okay. Let's first set the parameters. Let's say how about Boolean is oops walking. And then we will also be using the parameters that we use for our shoe, which is string brand, oops, brand and global size. Okay. And now, okay. So now we created this one. So every time we're going to use walking, we will have to set three parameters. Okay. Now, why do we have to set the string why do we have to give a parameter for the attributes for our superclass? Simply because since this is our subclass, we cannot create a subclass without having an superclass. So before you can walk, you need to set first what are the attributes needed for our superclass for this to work. And for that, we also have to set these parameters on top of the or attribute uh, on our walking class. So we can use super and have it sting, or let's just have this brand and size. Okay. And now we will be using this for is walking equals to is walking. Okay. So what happens here is that by using the keyword super, we will now be accessing the attribute on our superclass, which means whatever the value given on the parameters brand and size will now be set on our attributes on the superclass. And then by using the this function, this will allow us to give the uh, value of the is walking parameter to the is walking attribute. Okay, so now if you're going to try to run the program, okay, sample here. So I'll remove, let's say, instead of shoe, this is to try this walking. Oops. Okay, we're having a problem because take note, we have three parameters for walking. Okay, so we have to set here, we have to set two. Okay, so now if I'm going to call, okay, brand as for brand, take note, it's going to give me this value. Okay, so if I'm also going to okay, and this is going to be this. Okay, okay. As you can see, the value true has already been returned. Okay, so now also if I'm going to access our to continue, okay, let's try to create another one. So let's create another method. Let's call this one. Oops, let me minimize this one. Okay, running. So first, just remove this. Then and okay. So now let's say okay. So let's give it a new attribute for also boolean is running. Okay. And now we're going to create a constructor for this one. Okay. So let's say running. So okay. Boolean is running followed by let's say for the two parameters you'll have string brand and all size. Now, okay. So again, with this, we'll just have to use super. So we can access or the attributes on our uh, superclass will be set. So this is going to be is or uh, is running equals to is running. Okay. So okay. So now if you're going to set this to running, so this is going to be should be is running. So if we run this one, as you can see, we can still get the same value. Okay. Now, if I try to, okay, so, okay, let me create a method. So, mm, okay. So I'll just be using the print for, let's just say, okay, so brand, say, plus this dot brand, and then for this one, let's have system out size, and then followed by concatenation and this dot size. Okay. So now instead of calling this, I can just say s dot uh, print. Okay, I can just call print. So every time I'm going to run this, as you can see, the values are being given. Even though this method or this was set by calling the subclass, we created a method named print, but even though running doesn't have a method print encoded in it, it was able to access the method for print. So that is how we use inheritance. So whatever was is set on the superclass can now be or the parent class can now be inherited by the subclass or be used by the subclass. Also, as you can see here, by using super, we are able to access or set the value for the attributes on the superclass. If you're going to use this here, if this is just a this, okay, if we're just going to use this brand equals brand, so by doing just this or by doing this is on the walking. So let me change this to walking. By changing it to this, as you can see, the values were not set. or pass. Okay? So, that's a problem with, tama ba? So, yun. Okay? So, klaro ba tayo with super? Oh, okay, wait lang, natanggal yung super. Also, take note, ito medyo baka mahilo kayo dito. Take note that this is a method, this is a constructor. Magkaiba yung constructor sa method. Constructor is, take note, we set constructors para dito sa mga attributes natin. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, if you have attributes, if you don't want these attributes to be nulled or walang value, then you need to set constructors. So so that if uh, so that upon just creating pa lang, there is already a value on your for your attributes. Or if you don't want it to be like that, you can always have it or assign a value to it. But that's not always the case, because since it is or these attributes are dynamic, its values always change. That's why it's much better to have it or create a constructor, so that every time you create a different object, it means that object can have a different value for every attribute na meron si class or si object. Actually, the reason why we set constructors here, or bakit ko diniscuss yung constructor, because we use super. Okay? You cannot use super if your constructors was not set. Remember last Saturday, di ba nagkakaroon ako ng error? The reason for that one is that I was yung ginawa kong code or the walking was not set to a constructor, but it was set to a method. Instead of having it as a constructor, ginawa kong method siya. Kaya nagkakaroon ako ng problema with super. That is why this time around, kinaklaro ko sa inyo ano yung difference ng constructor and ng method. Method is yung what are the characteristics, 'di ba? Or hindi siya characteristic. Methods is kung ano yung mga capabilities ng class. Ano yung kayang gawin ng class. Now, constructors, iba siya. Constructors are more part siya ng attribute. Kumbaga, by setting constructors, you first have to give value to these attributes before you can use. Okay? Kaya nga nakita niyo dito, I have two types of constructors. Okay? I have this. Okay? Meron akong pwede kayong maglagay ng shoe na walang parameter, and pwede din maglagay ng shoe na may parameter. Pag yung shoe, di ko nilagyan ng parameters, immediately it's set, binigyan niya ng value si string and si double na. Si string, none. Si double is 0 ang value niya. Okay? But if lalagyan naman niya ng parameters ngayon, then whatever the value for brand, it will be given doon kay attribute natin na brand. And so on. By doing this, you are now able to use super or yung super keyword natin. Okay? You can now immediately assign the values kahit nasa subclass pa kayo.